Treatment of slaves. Situation or factors that some slaves may have faced that would have changed their outcome of the treatment. The size of the plantation. The size of the plantation would change how many slaves there were to see how valuable each one was actually individually for the master. Whether they were a farming slave, house slave, or even a personal slave. The master of the slave, how he treated them, and how many hours of work they had to do would have factored to how they would have been treated. Plantation size. The size of the plantation definitely affected the slave treatment. If there were a lot of slaves, for one, there would be an overseer, and they would push really hard. The overseer really didn't pay for the slaves, and he was just there to take care of them. And he would actually whip them and beat them just to prove that he was in charge. If the master didn't want to have an overseer, he would pay, he would have one of the slaves be and they were called a driver. He was hated among all the slaves because he was the one that had to punish the rest of the slaves for acting out. With smaller plantations, there would be less slaves, so there would be a lot more food, and it would be a lot easier to feed each one. And each slave would be more valuable because slaves were expensive, so they would be protected a little bit more by the master. Slave housing. On bigger plantations, slaves lived in small huts where they sometimes some of the food was actually not even edible for animals to eat, but they would feed it to them and they would practically starve. The conditions weren't really good for them. And their huts had no furniture and sometimes didn't even, they were made of dirt and some to little furniture, if any. If you were a farming slave, you would work from sunup to sundown 6 days a week. It was really brutal, no matter what the weather conditions. It could be raining, it could be sunny, it could be 100 degrees. You'd be working outside. And the jobs were not easy. It was backbreaking work. If you were a house slave, though, you were treated a little bit better because you were in the comfort of a home instead of outside all the time. And it wasn't as backbreaking as a farming slave because you didn't have to bend over and pick the cotton. It was just you made food and you took care of the kids if that's what the master wanted. The punishment of slaves. The punishment was given by the overseer, and the punishment really was only given to farming slaves. It wasn't uncommon for house slaves to be given this, but it was more uncommon because they were overseen a lot more and they had to live with the family and they become a lot closer. But some of the punishments they may have used was whipping, burning, shackling, branding, and even death if they tried to run. The reasons for the punishment would just be they could be disobedient, which was a lot common, but they could be late to the field or just to be shown who was in charge. They would do that. And here's a video. It's a movie about a slave. It's a true story about a slave who found his way from being free to a slave to free again.